Hold up. Don't sit down just quite yet. Yeah, not so fast. Because we're going to do something both traditional and reforming at the same time. It's time for some Bible verse memorization, but a little bit of camp style. That's right. Yeah, I heard an uh-oh right there. And when you hear that from a pastor, you know that means something. So repeat after me. And then also do kind of like a with your... All right. John 8, 36. If the Christ sets you free, then you will be free indeed. John 8, 36. If the Christ sets you free, then you will be free indeed. John 8, 36. If the Christ sets you free, then you will be free indeed. Okay, now you can sit down. Let that verse stick in your head. If the Christ sets you free, then you will be free indeed. The reforming grace of this if-then statement is that Jesus has set us free indeed. You are free. We are free. All of creation is free. But the reforming question is why we are not free. If Jesus set us free 2,000 years ago, why do we live like we are still bound? Why do we deny that we have ever been slaves when our shackles are visible around our necks? If we are free, then why do we need to work to live? If we are free, then why do we need guns to keep us safe? If we are free, why do our rights rest on the feelings of the powerful? If we are free, why are children treated like property? If we are free, why must we earn our keep? If we are free, why do we try to keep saving ourselves, save our country, to save our church? If Jesus has set us free, then why do we keep trying to do Jesus' job? And why are we letting other people take away the freedom that Jesus gives us? Because freedom means no work. Freedom means no works. God's freedom is not the boring beige of a 9-to-5, paychecks and paywalls. God's freedom is the brilliant blue of limitless days, the freedom to do nothing but exist as God's beloved child, as God's beloved world. Freedom is the right to be one with God, to be liberated from the need of salvation, from the need of want. Freedom is the gift of everlasting sufficiency. It begins by believing in the sufficiency of yourself to be saved. It continues by believing in the sufficiency of your neighbor to be loved. And it culminates by believing in the sufficiency of the earth to exist. This sufficiency feels so far away in a world that tells us that we are not free, that we are not enough, that tells us that everything needs to be perfect and perfectible. But the truth of the world, the truth of God's ever-reforming world, is that sufficiency is already here. New life awaits. By the grace of Jesus Christ, you are free. You are free to do nothing. You are free to do everything. You are free to live and love without limits. You are free to be who you are. You don't need permission from anyone. You have permission from God to exist as whoever you are in your full freedom. You can stop. You can stop believing in the forces of the world that tell you that you are not free. You don't have to accept them. You don't have to listen to them or accommodate them. You don't have to trust in the forces of the world that tell you to hate your neighbor, that tell you to treat your neighbor like they are disposable, that tell you to treat the earth like an opponent to be fought or like trash to be discarded. You don't have to play along. You don't have to justify your freedom. You don't have to earn the right to exist from the powers that be. You can reject them. You can leave them. You can break them. You can reform them. For Jesus has set you free. And Jesus has not set you free to be bound by any earthly master or human system. Jesus has set you free to be free and to give freedom to all whose life is bondage. You are free to live in God's freedom and set the earth free with the love of Christ. Can we do that, church? Are we ready to live into God's freedom? Are we ready to reform? Are we ready to be reformed by freedom? Are we ready to talk about anything without restriction? Yes? Was that a question? I mean that. Are we ready to talk about things like white supremacy and how it's corrupted the church? Are we ready to talk about the needs of our lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer, and otherwise siblings or selves, and how we need to be loved by a world that tells us that we are not lovable? Are we ready to talk about anything without restriction? Sex, gender, anything. Because until we are ready, we're not going to be ready to be reformed. But if we are ready to stand up for all God's children without reservation, then what's going to happen? Are we ready to stop? Trust that we are enough, that we all are enough. Trust in God's freedom over the false freedom of work and works. God has never stopped reforming the church and everyone in it. For God's law lives in our hearts, giving us the freedom to act with God's authority in the world. But reformation cannot happen without trusting Jesus when Jesus says that if the Christ, if the Christ sets us free, then we will be free. Let's try that again. If the Christ sets you free, then you will be free indeed. And when we believe in that freedom, the world changes. Can we change the world? The Spirit of God is upon you to proclaim liberation to the captives and good news to the poor. You have God's freedom. You have God's power. What will you reform?